Hey guys, welcome to another cracking installment of the Matt Brown Show. And today's going to be a little bit of a detour off our usual hardcore business stuff. And we're actually going to talk about something that I very rarely, if ever, talk about. And I'm sure that this will apply also in your life. And that subject is death. So not birth, actual death, dying. And so how the show actually came about, interestingly, was I'm mates with the author of an amazing book, which we're going to jump into. He's actually the author of many books, as you can see on this table. But let's just get him on with the let's just get him on, right? Robin, welcome to the show. Robin Wheeler. Cool, bro. So welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Matt. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, you're very welcome, man. The pleasure's all mine. So, or ours.
The team.
Yeah, exactly. So, so what is the name of your book? Because let's start there, because I think it's hilarious. Go.
You think you're seeing the funny side of it. It's called Death is the Ultimate Orgasm.
Yeah. So let's talk about that.
You start.
Yeah. How did you come up with that name?
Well, that's a big part of the story, actually. I was in Thailand in January, over December, actually, and I met up with someone there. His name's Simon Napier Bell. He was a well-known rock manager.
He managed lots of famous bands, didn't he?
Yeah, he managed the Yardbirds in the 60s, Mark Bolan in the 70s, Wham and George Michael in the 80s.
Boom.
And that's how the connection came about, because George Michael had just died a year before. And I'd been in touch with Simon, and we met up in Thailand, and we spent the day together. And that evening we were drinking wine and eating Italian food, and sort of just bantering up and down, you know. Okay. And then I just, in conversation, said, well, death is the ultimate orgasm. And he said, there's your best-selling title.
No, I'm sorry, but how do you just say something like that?
Well, it was a deep conversation. Because we had lunch for 6 hours, and then we took a break, and we were having dinner. So it was a build-up.
One of those lunches.
It was a climax of the conversation. So, but the man he's 78 at the time, 79 years old, and death was kind of part of the conversation, and sex was part of the conversation. We were in Thailand, in Pattaya, which is the entertainment capital. And we're both artistic people. We were just being creative and talking about life. And so that's really, it was kind of a spontaneous statement, but it's actually really a spiritual tradition. If you look at Eastern religions, they're basically saying that, It's really.
What do you mean by that?
Well, firstly, in most Western cultures, the way you started the show is that death isn't talked about.
It's true, right?
It's a taboo thing. Yeah. And religion basically has used that to maintain power over people, because you're scared of death, and you're worried about what's going to happen afterwards. So religion is in business.
But it's interesting when you compare Western and Eastern cultures, right? Because Western cultures, we have Kevin, is it Lavana Kumo? Larina, yeah. Sorry, I keep getting it wrong. So Kevin's coming on the show next week. He's a world champion boxer, and unfortunately, he's just lost someone close to him.
Right.
But now, I'm not using him as an exact example, but in the Western culture in general, it's like you wear black, it's a miserable thing, and it's lots of crying and blah, 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 and I understand it, I get it. But on the Eastern side of the culture, it's actually a celebration. They wear white. They actually celebrate the moving on of the soul, so to speak, which is a complete opposite of what we've experienced here in South Africa and Western culture. And I suppose that's kind of what you're talking about, where it's actually an Eastern philosophy, adopted philosophy, that death is not the end, and therefore it's actually something to be celebrated, not thought about as something like
avoided and repressed. That's one way of saying it. I mean, if you take that further. Death and life are inseparable. The moment you conceived, your death is already built into that.
Yeah, you're going to die.
Yeah,
so congratulations.
You have to embrace that. If you want to be realistic about life, you have to embrace death. Otherwise, you're living in delusion. And if you're living in delusion, you can't live properly. So if you want to live, you need to embrace death. And you can see even with retreats, I run retreats around the world, and the one in Rishikesh is going to the cemetery and sitting and meditating among the graves. I mean, it sounds like a hectic thing to do for your average Westerner. But if you can't face the reality that... I was at a friend's dad's funeral last week. If you can't face the reality that it's you in that box, not your friend's dad, you, then you are not in touch with reality, and you're not going to live properly. You're going to live in the illusion. So it's to wake people up.
Okay. So what's the premise of the book?
Well, the premise is firstly, death is part of life, not separate from life. It's not the end of life, but it's integral to life. So we're living and dying all the time. And if you can bring that close to you and be aware of it, you're awakening your consciousness. And then to live in a more conscious way, you're going to have to integrate all different areas of your life. So my main message is being yourself for a living. That's what my brand's been for 22 years.
So that's what these books are about, right?
Yeah,
so
those books
the
are...
Insight series, all about being yourself for a living,
Yeah.
right?
Easy to read insights, deep spiritual stuff. It's really sort of taking ancient spirituality and the modern world of music and business and entrepreneurship and fashion and turning that into a modern vernacular that helps people live on a higher level of consciousness for a new age.
I love it. There's so many dichotomies with the world of entrepreneurship because it is life or death. You know, if this business fails, like, it affects the lives of everybody that works for me. And I can tell you, like, I don't know, it's just such an interesting subject to dive into, and that's really why I wanted to get you onto the show, was because it wakes people up.
Yes.
And I think that, you know, when you're in the trenches every day taking grenades, you just get into this machine of, like in our world, it's producing content and stories and stuff like that. But it takes, I don't know, a kind of a different kind of experience to get perspective. Right. And so death is just, as a subject, one, we don't speak about it, but two, when you actually start to explore it, it starts to make you conscious of things that you aren't conscious about or thinking about on a daily basis. It actually starts to make you realize, actually, well, why the fuck am I doing this? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. So that's, again, digging deeply. And if you take yourself, for example, you've been a serial entrepreneur. So those are all the series of deaths you've been through. You give birth to something, you nurture it, and then it dies. And so you might go through the grief of that. You'd have to process it. But one of the things I found as an entrepreneur in the early days was I would have to survive my worst fears, you know, run out of money. And then you scramble for days and panic. And then you wake up on the morning where all those debit orders are going through, and you open the one eye and you're not dead. That's all you got, is that you're not dead. And then you realize, okay, I was living based on a certain sense of myself, and now I've actually awakened to a deeper sense that can bridge those gaps or survive those challenges. And that resilience or that depth is what becomes the ripened entrepreneur. And that's the one who ultimately succeeds, who's been through all those deaths and knows who he is or who she is. So death's essential in an entrepreneur's life.
Yeah, it's like, I call it the failure train, right? So every entrepreneur, I don't care who you are, at some point will book 2 first-class tickets to the failure train. And oftentimes that's manifested in the context of a business where that business dies. It doesn't survive. And I've been there 6 times. I'm busy writing the book about it. It's about this whole story.
There you go.
And this is really about the rebirth of not only the business, because I think for me, something can die, but it's not the end. You know, it's like that TB thing we did for Sanofi. It's not the end. You know, even when you're faced with a life-threatening or situation, or in the case of a business dying, it's not the end, because your journey will continue beyond that business's termination, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And then it's all about the process of regrowth and believing in oneself again and acknowledging the fact that there are some things that you can control, but there are also things that you can't. And that's where your power sits.
Yeah.
Right?
But now if you take that and apply that to physical life, it's the same thing. It's quite possible. We don't know yet because none of us have died yet. But what I'm saying in the book is be open. Go into it consciously. Don't shy away from it. Don't be afraid of it. Actually go to your death consciously. But to do that and to actually be aware, like Aristotle did, he was sentenced to death for being intelligent. Society said to him, you're too intelligent for us. Either leave or drink this poison. He says, I'll take the poison because I've lived. I've fully lived. And he drank the stuff, and he said, my feet have gone numb. I can't feel them, but I'm still here, so I'm not my feet. His legs went. I'm still here. And he said, well, then who's left? So if you actually got the courage, the balls to face life squarely, which is what an entrepreneur does. You start off innocently, but then you ripen and you grow. And death is what makes you do that, makes you dig deeply. So it's the same on life, on the biggest level of life, was let's see what it is. Let's go and find out. Let's be aware. Let's not believe. Let's not take false things and fill in the gaps. Let's go and find out. And an entrepreneur is someone who sets out in their journey of life and business to do that. And a real entrepreneur, someone who survives those deaths and gets their brand where you're getting it with your book, becomes a true change agent, because you're able to help people through barriers that they don't normally go through because they're all busy conforming.
Why is there so much sort of fear associated with death? It's like, to your point, I mean, I want to go both. We'll jump between personal and business because it's just, you can't avoid one without the other. But if in the context of a business, like I've been there, absolutely, any entrepreneur's been there where you know that debits are coming off for mortgages and stuff and school fees and shit, and you don't have cash. You know what I mean? And you wake up and you're like, and then you get through it, you know? But you don't know that until you're through it. So you are scared shitless, man. Exactly. I can't tell you. Like you wake up in cold sweats, you isolate yourself, you beat yourself up, do you know what I mean? It's just a horrible, horrible train to be on. And so there's tons of fear associated with that. But equally in the personal context, it's like, you know, if it's like I hate taking out life insurance because like I had to do that with Discovery on the request of my wife. But I'm like, well, fuck that. I'm not even 40. You know, I'm not going to die. So you don't think it's going to happen to you, but you don't know if it will. Like I could go for a checkup to the doctor next week and suddenly that's it. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I get told something. So you don't really know. But again, when you are told that, like there's just an immense amount of fear that immediately manifests in your head about this event that you don't control. So in your experience, why is there so much fear associated with these two types of scenarios?
I'd say just unpacking that as I listen to you, firstly, it's the unknown. So anything that's unknown is inherently fear promoting. And then you have to be able to face the unknown. Being born was coming into the unknown. So even though our consciousness now is something that I can use language to talk to you, we were born in a pre-verbal state, but we were conscious. So we came into this world. It's an inherently fear-overcoming thing. It's a brave thing. So what's driving you underneath? Something deeper. Same as an entrepreneur. What makes you jump out of your comfort zone? Usually it's desperation or a combination of desperation, like you've been retrenched 3 times or you're not happy with what you're doing and it's killing you, so again, death. So you actually risk and go out and do something that matters to you. And then you survive those failure experiences, which again is just a duality, you know, up and down, left and right. Life works in duality, day and night. But beyond that duality, if you take the earth and pull away from it, there's no duality. The sun doesn't come up and down. It's just a matter of smaller perspective. So you grow through those failure experiences and you get a better perspective. So we're scared of the unknown. We're also conditioned to fear death. We're conditioned to live in fear. So we actually are not our true selves. We are the product of society. And that journey of embracing death and waking up is also about finding out who we really are, which comes back to being yourself for a living.
How does one approach overcoming that then?
Just be aware. Firstly, what I help people do is understand the change that's happening in the world. You're using words to describe it, but basically we've come out of the 20th century where you fitted in. There were rules. You followed those rules. You gave up who you were to do your job. It was an industrial model of work. And now we're in this 21st century. I started in 96, so it was just before the millennium, and this vision was very much part of it. But now we're hitting 2020s on the horizon. So we're living it now, where jobs are changing. Artificial intelligence will eliminate 80 or 90% of them in 2 years. So we have to invent our jobs. Based on what? Well, firstly, look inwards at who you are, what your purpose is in life, what your talents are, being yourself. And secondly, look at what the world needs and align those two things like you're doing, being of service to the world. You're sitting in your home studio in your own clothes, being yourself. You're not fitting in, you're creating, you are being a visionary, you are overcoming obstacles, you're leading a team of people. So that is an entrepreneurial stance. And we're all having to do that one way or the other. And usually, like all of nature, if a river's flowing down to the sea, it doesn't just wake up one morning, Tuesday morning, and go, okay, let's take a different route. It needs a tree or a rock or a change to make it change. So we all actually resist change. But when we do embrace it, we go onto a higher level of awareness, and it's rewarding for everybody. So
it's funny how you spend the first 20 years of your life trying to fit in, and then the next 20 years of your life trying to stand out.
Yeah, and trying to differentiate your brand and trying to be the person you were brought here to be. So for me, the time we're in now, human history now, firstly, it's a do or die situation. I mean, the planet is in a bad way. It's insane. And it's insane upon insane. I mean, if it was just one factor, like rapid change, but there are like multiple factors on top of each other that are unfathomable. A nuclear war is a big threat. It's a do or die situation. We either wake up or we might not be here, like all the animals we've killed. We'll just kill ourselves off, a virus that wasn't intelligent enough to keep the host going. Or we shift into a higher awareness, which is what this is all about, and live in a sustainable, creative way. So human beings are waking up to who we're meant to be.
Which I suppose is why Elon Musk is doing what he's doing, right?
Exactly. I've got a few things I'd like to chat to him about.
What would you want to say to him?
Well,
I mean, he's watching right now.
When I'm interviewing him like you interviewing me.
He stopped everything because we went live.
Yeah, it's funny, but it's true. He may well be there, but in my new book, I talk about him, and I say, and this is what I'll speak to him about, because when you see these things he's doing, he's scientifically got an answer, but spiritually he's lacking what I'm talking about. He needs me, and together we will be stronger, because who goes to Mars?
Suppose people who aren't afraid of death.
Well, there's one thing that's a good insight. So those are more awakened people. But who chooses them?
I got no. That part I don't understand. Like, I met Adriana Maria, who's actually going on that 2020 spaceship to Mars, the first humans outside, I think, SpaceX. And so I met her and shared a cab ride with her, and I actually asked her, I said, why are you going to Mars? I mean, you're not going to come back. Like, you're going to die there. Like, you're literally going and choosing to die on a different planet, and you're leaving everyone that you know, everyone that loves you, everyone that you love, and everything that you've known your entire life, to get on a spaceship, to go to a foreign place where, in all probability, you might not make it there, right? Even just landing would
chilling
be a
perspective.
thing. Yeah, it's like, and then she said to me, I said, why are you going? And she said to me, well, because I have to go. For her, there is no the whole narrative for her in her head is different to the average person who's like, fuck that. Like, why would I go to Mars? Do you know what I mean? I got a business to run. Do you know what I mean? But for her whole thinking is completely different. It's just something that it's innately in her to go and do.
So that's that innate thing of, if she's called to do that, then that's good. One would do that thing, whatever it happens to be in her instance. I would challenge her on another level. Firstly, my question is, who goes? If you got shit in your life and you go to Thailand, the shit goes with you. Okay, so until you face yourself, you can run, but you can't hide. So if you really want to awaken, if you've got shit in your business and you need to face it, so humanity will take its troubles with it to Mars. We'll do the same thing to Mars that we did here. So running away is not the solution. Facing ourselves is the solution. And then whilst we're doing that, we may as well stay here because it is fucking paradise. We just got to realize that. So most people wouldn't go because we've already got what we want and need here. And the issues that we've confronted with are issues that we should be facing anyway. So I would be saying that, because also, who chooses you to go? Some Illuminati committee that puts you through a whole lot of tests, which means you can lie in a spacesuit for 2 days without losing your mind. That's not the best person to send to Mars. You want an enlightened person to go, so that humanity on the new colony is the enlightened humanity that could come back here and recolonize Earth. But where are all the enlightened people, Elon Musk included? Because if he were enlightened, he wouldn't maybe be doing that.
Yeah. Big questions, man, and we're going to dive back into that in a second. But really, the thing that's fascinating for me about death, the underlying thing is time, right? And you've got this rad quote. So, quote of the day.
One of my many. Can you see that there?
So, you go read it off to us, bud.
Well, it's based on Steve Jobs' quote, his famous quote, "Your time is limited, so don't." And then I changed it, wasted quoting someone else. Because everyone quotes Steve Jobs, but he's saying to them, don't waste your time. It's the same as that famous Stanford thing. He said he dropped out of varsity, and there are all these graduates cheering that. They don't realize that he's actually confronting them there. So I'm confronting people, and I'm saying, don't quote other people. Write your own quotes. What's your view on the world? Get your voice going. Don't just accept things from the outside. So your time is limited, so don't waste it quoting someone else. Find your own voice, whichever that may be. You've got podcasts, radio, interviews, and entrepreneurship. Some people might be quiet. They may do it in a visual way or a musical way. But don't be caught up in, be the Steve Jobs. Be the Matt Brown.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, the other thing about that, just quoting or trying to come up with your own insightful things to say, like in 140, 280 characters now, is that it causes you to reflect, actually. You know, and I can tell you, like, I always get better responses when it comes from me. If I try and be smart and try and tweet about something that I think would be cool, you know, like people go, yeah, move on, next one, scroll.
Sincerity comes through, the authenticity speaks.
It always does. I mean, authenticity is the game, and we just put this video out, when was it, on Friday, Mav? About authenticity and how the world's actually crying out for authenticity.
Very much.
It's like you got fake news, Photoshop photos. It's just a world dominated by things you can't trust.
Yeah.
And so when you stand as a personal brand or as an entrepreneur, as a human being, when you stand up and you be your authentic self, there's a huge amount of power that's embedded within that. And that's what I think resonates with people, because you say things differently, you behave differently, and it's infectious. People start to believe in the
people
shit.
People need it.
Yeah,
they want it. People are lost, and they're looking for themselves. What people want is something real. And even that thing with death, people don't want money or fame or success. They want the experience of being fully alive. It's the absence of that makes you look in substitutes. And you'll take people who've got all those things, fame and fortune. Firstly, they probably die of drug overdose.
Well, just unhappiness, bro. That'll kill them.
And those material things amplify the unhappiness, because they're seeking those things to compensate for the unhappiness, and then it just amplifies them. So the work that they were avoiding, they actually have to do rich and famous on the top floor of their apartment, of their penthouse. So you rather do the work up front. Start with facing yourself. Be real. What I often say is the truth's all out there. If you take all the main religious texts and you read through those, it pretty much covers all the bases. So it's not the truth that matters. It's the authentic testimony to that truth. If you've been through it and you're sharing it from your own experience, that's what resonates with your customer. That's what is your brand identity. So it's not the content, actually. It's the essence of things.
I love that. So I had I suffer from imposter syndrome. So you do as a writer. I'm sure you've had do you know what that is, right?
No.
Okay. Really?
Enlighten
that's when
me.
you go, so at some point during writing any of these books or this current book, did you sit there and go, I shouldn't be writing this, or have a moment of doubt that people will judge you for the thing that you wrote?
I'd say, look, I mean, I'm answering that question and adding to it. I'm not really following, but
so let me explain some more. So
please
so
finish
imposter syndrome is a proven thing.
Right.
Okay, so every entrepreneur has it. Right. I have it. And I'll explain more about the book. Every single entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur I've interviewed has suffered from it.
Right.
Celebrities, actors suffer from it. It's documented online. Musicians, everyone that's famous. The Club of 27.
Right. It's in my new book.
It's the underlying thought that you are not good enough.
Right,
that your value is not worthy of the thing that you're trying to create.
Right.
That's why musicians have it. It's about the music, right?
Sure.
It's not fucking good enough, and we're not doing it. Or in my case, the book. I'm not worthy to write that book. When by all accounts, I am. And it's just your own
Perception,
inner narrative, right? And the interesting thing, just to echo what you said a couple minutes ago, was about. It's not about the content, it's about the essence of what you say.
Yes.
And so when I had this imposter syndrome, and I literally had writer's block and I hadn't written a single word.
Right.
It was just like I've just complete imposter syndrome takeover. And so I phoned Howard Mann, I phoned Rich Mulholland, I phoned Tom Asacker, who's a 6-time international best-selling author. And they all gave me advice about how to get over this stuff.
Right.
But Tom said something to me really amazing. Like, and if you guys listening to this on the show afterwards on my podcast, like, go back and find Tom Asacker and listen to this guy. He's amazing. So I said to him, dude, you're a 6-time international best-selling author. Like, how did you make that happen? Like, talk to me about your process. Like, what was your inner dialogue? Like, how did you find the thing that you would just blurt out 60,000 words and you knew that this was a book that you could stand behind? And he said to me, you know what, Matt? He's written 6 books. His view is that 3 of those books were failures. And the reason for that was because every time he wrote a book about what he thought the market wanted, it didn't really work. It was painful to write. It didn't sell as well. I mean, he still became a bestseller, but it didn't sell as well as the books that came from him. So when he said to me, Matt, as long as it comes from you, you're good. Then you'll make it. Like that's the book people want to read. And that it took me time to like digest it and process it and whatever. But now I'm sitting on like 42,000 words, but it all came from like the truth, my truth, not what I like. This is why I hate disruption, innovation conversations, because it's bullshit.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
I don't have those.
Yeah, well, there you go.
It's also, people generally have using that terminology to try and get through to the audience, which is usually a way of leveraging their product, you know. But disruption, when does disruption start? And when does it end? Those are all based on boundaries, which are all assumptions. That's all perceptions. We're in a state of constant flux. Life is a dynamic state of being. It's an existential space that you're in. Disrupt that how? An enlightened person is in a state of constant disruption. That's your awareness. That's your bubbling with life, you know. So again, it's just about waking up, being more conscious. And that what you did now with your book is you shifted out of the imposter, which was the false you trying to write. And that's the problem with writing, is a false you can't write. My books are they're like channeled. I just write what comes to me. So I never have writer's block because I'm completely free to write what I want. I don't have any imposition that I put on myself. So it's like my higher self is writing it. And that's what you did. So, and again, that chap that advised you, you know, he says the book will work. What does work mean? Sell? That's only one aspect of a book. Some books can take years before they actually sell. My books have been coming out for 20 years, and it's been a building momentum. So now this new one is the head of everything that's happening, and all my other books are coming in behind that. They're timeless things because I've written with a timeless voice. So we're all on a journey into who we really are, and we're going to be peeling away those layers of what's false. And it usually takes death to wake us up to that.
They say no man becomes a true man or his authentic self as an adult before his father dies.
That's interesting.
I read that the other day because like I've got a very strained relationship with my old man. So like, and that's the thing that you role play in your head. Like,
sure.
You know, should I and shouldn't I?
How
And, you know, we all have.
Yeah.
Most people don't survive their parents, and so and death is the thing, right? That's the actual thing that makes you reevaluate whether or not relationships that you have with people that you care about, like my old man and Mav and his parents and brothers and siblings and so forth, like we all have our own shit.
Sure.
But death is the thing for me anyway that really starts to hold up a mirror.
Clarifies things.
Yeah, man. It's 2020. It's like they say hindsight's a perfect science, but death is far more accurate.
Absolutely. It's the bottom line of all things. And in that, the greatest advisor you can have. Even Steve Jobs said, turn to your death. What does your death say? Because you might be going through this month end with all your bills. What does your death say? Your death laughs at that.
Well, when you die, the government takes like 50% of your assets. Do not die, people.
But you can leave them to grapple over the assets, you know. So it's, that's their domain. But you're a deeper being than that. And if you just lived according to governments, you wouldn't live your life. So you have to claim your own intelligence, claim your own power. Don't just do what the government tells you to do. Do what's most wise to you. Lead humanity. Governments don't lead. They have a different agenda. So it's entrepreneurs who lead.
Let's get on with what we're doing now. Knockout punch. Okay, cool. Your knockout punch, dude. So this is part of the show where you give us your top tip. Can be about death or business or life or whatever the case is. So what is the one knockout punch that you think entrepreneurs can apply in their businesses right now and shoot the lights out?
Well, I'd say you talk about entrepreneur and business. Firstly, you're a human being. So anything that extends from that, which is your business, comes from who you are first. So know yourself, be following your calling, doing what you truly are, not even believe in, but truly, truly know. So in African spirituality, your ancestors are very much a visceral presence in your life. Ask them what you should be doing. What is your name? What does your name mean? Your name is actually, you know, your destiny. Find out who you are, do that soul searching, and go on that journey. And then make that your business, because you'll never survive the stress of entrepreneurship without that depth. You'll never have your edge in the market without that depth. You'll never self-actualize when you get through all those challenges without that depth. So go on the inner journey of who you are, what your calling is, and how you can be of service to people. Be yourself for a living. That's my tip. And then business just follows from that, you know. It's up and down, in and out, change, ongoing change.
So I found that being an entrepreneur is way more like if you gave me like a 100% pie graph, right, and you said, can you allocate as a percentage the proportion of, in terms of entrepreneurship, like what is business and what's personal?
Right.
I'd say it's 80% personal and
Okay.
20% business. Really, I think it's everything is about you. You can't scale a business unless you adopt scale thinking. Which is the whole premise of the book that I'm writing, you know. Right. And if you can't pick yourself up when you get knocked down, if you're not the one to make that choice, you won't employ people, you won't create any value, you won't be of service. You can't be that authentic human if you don't become that person yourself. No one will make or help you get, well, that's not true. No one can get you there for you. You have to do the work.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
We each on that individual journey. We have to be ready. That's why one of the criteria I have for corporate clients is you need to satisfy the 3 R's. You know, corporates are pretty arrogant, and they'll tell you what their selection criteria.
You mean people, right?
Well, yeah, people, but banks, for example, they'll tell you need X, Y, Z, and you've got to meet the criteria. Well, my criteria are the 3 R's. You've got to be real, you've got to be ready, and you've got to remunerate. And you'll remunerate me correctly if you're ready and real. So you go and do the work, you write the proposal. I'm not writing you a proposal. You pay me, I might read your proposal. So you get ready, you demonstrate that you're real, and you pay us the deposit, which will be included in the project. So you turn the whole thing around. And one of the things that an entrepreneur does is, because you've survived your worst fears, you become a change agent. You can work with territories, whether it's death or money or growth, that other people don't ever reach because they're so busy conforming and they're so busy living in fear. So you're able to facilitate transformation. That's my word. Change is about more or less of the same thing. Transformation comes from another realm, and that's what an entrepreneur does. An accountant goes from 1 to 2. An entrepreneur goes from 0 to 1. It's quantum. And to do that, you're working with different energy, and you need to go on that journey into yourself. You're an alchemist, basically, through people, through business, through leadership. So that thing of your 80-20, those details just follow. And I mean, if you really get to that place where you're being yourself for a living, you'll swallow up that 20 as well. You'll just be being. And that's what an enlightened person does. You're just being. You don't have to do anything.
Also, it gives you a greater capacity to become something like a complete savage. Like, I was listening to, no, seriously, like I was listening to Joe Rogan, and he interviewed Matt Brown. Not this one, but Matt Brown, the MMA fighter. In fact, if you ask Siri who is Matt Brown, it goes, Matt Brown is a MMA mixed martial arts fucking kick-ass takes name dudes, you know, and you're like, yeah. And then Joe Rogan was basically talking to Matt, and Matt basically was a drug addict, and so he overdosed. This was before he became like who he was. Yeah. And so, and he overdosed on heroin, and he died. Okay, he was literally dead on the table. And somehow he came back to life and so forth. And so now you put Matt Brown in a cage, okay, who has died, versus another guy who's just well trained. That man is a fucking savage. Yeah. Like, it's just no like limits, in your head, you like, this guy's like, he's died. Like, he's gone that to a place that is just so scary and so less traveled. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, that's the thing for me that made Matt Brown, not this one, the other one, awesome, you know, and the fact that he's, outside of just being a wicked fighter, he's just a complete savage, and that's what made him, in other words, that gave him the capacity.
Next level stuff.
It wasn't the only thing, but it was certainly something that when he gets in a cage, he's like, fuck this, I'm going to take this guy, I'm going to have a real honest conversation with this man, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it brings out the honesty, and that thing of being, I mean, if you go back to the spiritual traditions, whether it's, say, martial arts, the guy, the mentor will teach you that if you still get angry, you've got work to do. Because those fights, you bow and you respect, those guys will duel for hours, because they really know what the other guy's going to do. It's not a cognitive knowing. It's not thought. It's being. It's awareness. And again, that's about facing your death. Being able to die to your personality. Let that anger die. Face yourself. Go through those barriers so that no one's got any hooks that they can hook in you. And then you bring a superhuman power to what you do, whether it's a spiritual presence, who is just a meditative kind of master, or a fighter, or an entrepreneur, or a writer, or whatever your vehicle, your tool is. You know, John McEnroe, I saw him play at Wimbledon in 1992. I knew that if that guy had been born 100 years before, he would have been a drug addict. because he was born to play tennis. Him and tennis were like the same thing. He had to play tennis. It was such a calling in him, and we all have that in my view. Okay, some of us are high profile and famous and rich or whatever. Other people are equally rich in their solitude, in their silence, in their quiet, reserved way. We can't all be at the front, you know. Everyone's got their place.
Do you follow a guy on Twitter called Naval Ravikant?
No, I don't know.
You should totally do that. Like, you just search on Twitter, everyone, for Naval, just Naval.
Okay.
Just that, or you'll find him. He's got like a bazillion followers, and all this guy does is tweets like one word shit. You know, like. Well, I think I might misquote him now, but it's like someone said, "What is the difference between arrogance and ignorance?" And he went, "Indifference." You know what I mean? It's like this really powerful. Like the guy's not really human. Yeah. He's a proper higher frequency vibrating guy with a voice. You know, on Twitter, it's totally worth following. Yeah,
but we all need to find that within us, because you're talking about, you know, even the Twitter culture. Okay, it's up to 280 now, but 140 characters. That's Zen. To be able to articulate life's profundities in a short sentence. That's what your English teacher taught you. Write a précis of this. So it's actually all of those great wisdoms of all time. You know, if you take a great spiritual teacher, they'll do that. You go to them and you bow and you say, "This is what you want." And the guy will kick you. Or he'll throw something at you. Or he'll do something spontaneous that is exactly what you needed to hear at that time. You were nearly enlightened, but you just had one bullshit issue that you were coming to him with. And he saw right through you, and he did a thing that was his tweet. And you went away with that tweet for the rest of your life. Or if I say to you, "Are you okay with your relationship with your dad?" If I gave you 60 seconds with him, you're a time-based guy here. If I said, "You've got 60 seconds, what would you want to say to him?" You must be ready for that. Maybe you'll still go and say it to him right now. You'll say, "Excuse me," and go and say it. Or you'll get it to him
right, that's it. We're stopping the show.
But that thing of what spiritual masters, their famous last words are, "What do you leave the world with? What is your statement? What would you go out saying if this was the last minute we had?" To be in tune with that is what makes you that prize fighter, makes you that profound guy who can, because his whole life has gone into that one word. He's so present. All of his intelligence is there. And to do that, you need to be present. And to be present, you need to be your true self. You need to awaken through all the illusions to who we really are.
I love this. I want to come back to purpose and legacy in a second. But now it's time for the Injustice League. So here's where we're going to get you to start swinging baseball bats and shit. So Mav's going to get our guy set up. This is your guy that you're going to smash.
Okay, you sure I'm going to smash it?
Yeah, you totally are.
Okay, well, let's see. Because I was thinking about this before I came. And I thought I'd renegotiate it with you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, go.
Well, firstly, this is one of your podcast things that you do, and you inviting me here to bring something unique, then what I'm bringing is something that no one else has done. So I'm going to ask you why you like to smash things, rather than to negotiate them, for example.
It's too deep for me, dude. Just smash the fucking man.
Well, let me put it this way. I could smash it. But if I had to smash this, I'd smash this whole fucking table. Okay? So to save this for your next podcast, if I've got my bugbear is that I was never allowed to be myself. I had to fit in at the expense of my whole life. Okay? So that's my big injustice, is that as we sit here now, there are kids all over, some kids of people in this room, who've been conditioned out of being who they are, into fitting in, into standing in rows, sitting in rows, wearing uniforms. So that injustice is the biggest tragedy in human history. But to smash it, I don't think that would be the solution. I mean, if I want to change that, sure, I'm angry, sure, I'm frustrated, even at this stage in my career. There's still that urge to be angry about it. But that anger is my responsibility. Because if I use that challenge to grow in me rather than to try and smash the world around me up. Sure, I could do that as a meditation. I could say, okay, I need to express my destruction of something, or I need to vent my feelings. But then I would take responsibility for that. And I would say, okay, well, I'm doing this as a meditation. But if I come out of that meditation and I'm still dealing with that injustice, how would I handle it? Well, firstly, I would just personify the new. I wouldn't smash it. I'd be friends with it. I'd say, hey, man, you're my buddy. And this is a nice bat. This is a phallic symbol. Phallic symbol. Ring the bell. There's my...
you got to get a photo of this, man. This is too good.
I'm glad you like it. Thanks.
Robin Wheeler in the house. I respect that shit. Clap that up, guys. Clap that up. Yeah, man. That's legit, dude. That's legit. Well, I think that's awesome, man. That's really speaking the truth, bro. Respect, man. Respect. That's cool. And also, I get what you're saying. Do you know what I mean? I think, like, and your injustice was essentially like people who don't feel like they can be themselves or aren't living their life on kind of their own terms or what have you, either from circumstances that are beyond their control or within their control. That's essentially the injustice that you see.
Yes, big time.
And oftentimes people lash out.
Well, that rage, firstly, it's repressed. So you're actually killing yourself. You're committing suicide every day. I did a thing a few years ago called suing for service. I took on every corporate that I'd had a bad experience with. I put it in the press. I put my brand online. I was on the radio. Some people supported it. I was on all the main radio stations discussing this. I was so angry, and I was dealing with these corporate replies that made me more angry. I was doing the Elvis windmill in the lounge with wrath, and I was like reliving my being bullied at school and the injustice of teachers who were just so stupid, but they still had authority there, you know. And I realized how much rage was repressed in me, and that's what makes people ill, is when they don't. When they push their feelings down. So it's almost like a catharsis you've got to come through.
Well, that's why we asked them to swing a baseball bat, because it gives people the opportunity to actually talk about something that's really...
To open up about it.
Yeah, and to let it out. And to have fun with it. You know what I mean?
Fun is a big element.
Yeah, because look, life's just so fucking serious, man. You know,
exactly.
And like we all take life so seriously all the time. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, and everything, when you do that, you apply so much pressure to yourself that quite frankly isn't necessary.
Sure.
You start to worry about things. And you know what? Out of 100 things that I worry about, 99 of those things don't happen.
That's the nature of worry. But also just that repression, that anger, that thing weakens you. So if you can reverse that process and express it, be real about it, have fun about it, get it out, and then you realize that you don't need to fight with your environment. You can actually just lead by being who you are and providing a service from there. And those people will come to you in good time.
Yeah, and also it's about giving your energy to things that you potentially can't solve.
Exactly.
You know,
you're like, losing your power again by putting it out.
Yeah, exactly. And just it's like I try and do this with my wife, right? So when she gets upset about something, I just say, yeah, but stop giving a fuck. Really, just stop caring. Because when you, like, the moment you, look, I know it's not in all cases, context is very important here.
Sure.
But when you stop caring about things, the little things, it's like, don't sweat the little things, sweat the big stuff, you know? Because there's so much happiness in that. And I can tell you, it's like, when you're running a business and you got, like, marriage and kids and 2.5 dogs and a bazillion other things that are on your plate, there's loads of things that I could choose on a daily basis to get pissed off about, you know. But when you don't and you just stop giving a fuck, there's power in that. Do you know what I mean?
Because there's even that book saying that. But I mean, that's very much a guy thing you've just said. It's a guy solution. A chick needs to talk. So the feminine side in all of us isn't actually trying to solve a problem. She's just got a feeling in her that she needs to unpack. And being heard, I'm like that. Being heard and being loved are the same thing to me. It was because I wasn't heard as a child. So that thing of being able to hear yourself and to just unpack. So it's upsetting her for some reason, because even though it's a minor issue, it's big to her because it's triggering something in her that once she's got through that, she's, okay, I'm feeling better. So we all need to learn to hear ourselves. We can do it in relationship. And I mean, it's the classic sort of relationship thing of the chick just wants to talk and be heard, and the guy's like, what's the problem here? Do ABC. But if you learn to hear yourself, then you can actually give yourself what you need and be free of those frustrations, you know. And then also that does make it kind of don't sweat the small stuff in the end, because you've heard what it means to you, and the stuff does just become small.
Cool. I Love it. By the way, Mav, if you ever go on a date, just ask lots of questions. It works all the time. What do you think?
Just listen.
Sonal, does that work for you? Hang on, turn her mic on there. Does it work for you?
Advice to Mav, if he ever goes on a date. I wouldn't really ask questions. I'd more listen to what she has to say and reply with an emotional response, not a computer-generated click the I'm a robot response. Just for all male people out there.
Reflect her feelings back to her, and you'll be trying to get rid of her after that. That's it. Turn the tables. Embrace the inner feminine, and she'll respond to that.
There you go, Mav. See, added value. So I want to talk about legacy because I think it's a really big deal when you talk about death. And because you said, and we never actually answered it, but you said when you die, what are you going to say? That's what you said. Yeah. But for me, it's like, what do you leave behind? Oftentimes, so for me, there's family and kids and that legacy side of things. But also there's a whole subject and discussion to be had about purpose,
right?
And understanding like your why and why you do things. Right. And I was listening to Robin Sharma's podcast, and he said the other day, it was like, I remember the two questions, but the context was about passion. Like, how do you know who you need to become, whatever. And so basically he was saying, look, when you die, there's two things that people will answer. And he said, who did you become? What will people say about Robin when he died? Or about Matt, when he died? Like, if someone said, like, who did Matt become? Well, became an entrepreneur, became a dad. Like, that's your legacy. Then, in terms of purpose, it's about another question. And that question is this: who did you help? So Matt helped entrepreneurs in over 100 countries around the world. How did he do that? Well, primarily through his podcast. Matt helped grow the careers of, 25, 50, 150 employees, of which, 50 of those became entrepreneurs and they went and employed. Like, that for me is the legacy. I found that really insightful because it lands the thing around legacy and purpose. Because I've had this conversation a few times on the show. A lot of people don't think like passion and purpose and all that thing really matters. It's like you will never find your purpose. You will only ever create it. And while that's obviously debatable, for me that's really important, right? Because how many times, I can't tell you, even in my own life, it's like I've been like, well, one day when I find the right marriage or person, I'll marry that chick or whatever, or that dude. When I find the right job, when I find the right employer, when I find the right degree, when I find, meaning you are always at effect, you're never at cause. But the moment you change it to say, well, I'm going to create that relationship, do you know what I mean? Because there's no right woman or right man. It's about creating the relationship dynamic to have that result, right?
I'll ring the bell.
Yeah, exactly. Do you know what I mean? So, like, and just in your experience, and obviously, if there's anything in the book you want to share, like George Michael dying, like he left a fucking amazing legacy,
Sure.
And it's a really big deal. And I think every entrepreneur thinks about this stuff, about what they will leave behind and why they do things. What's your...
Well, we could do another whole show on that. But if you take George, for example, okay, so he had this wound. Simon speculated that George was sexually abused as a child, and that pain is what caused all of his fame. He wanted to be famous, to be loved, because he had pain. You said it earlier, all the imposter syndrome. So every great person has been driven by some sort of wound and pain, combined with their genius, their talent. So the things that were my injustice are the things that people are driven to overcome. But then what happened is his story, his narrative, his myth, his living myth, took him, so he became big and famous. He went solo, he got bigger. Then he started to fight with a record company. Then his creative output dropped, and eventually he died at 53, drug addicted and not at his best. So what is the actual legacy? So you could say he left us the music, but he left us a chilling insight into that, like Jim Carrey says, those things are not the answer. They're part of you finding the answer. But George left us, and my new book's about that, is, well, how did he die? He died alone on Christmas Day, last Christmas. I mean, it's even his song. There's a little bit of gay tinsel in there. There's a narrative that he's giving you. But he's putting you in touch with the grief of actually, as great as he was, he missed his life because he came here and he lived this arc of story, but who he really was underneath still never quite got there. So legacy is about immortality. You're too fucking scared to die, so you want kids, you want books. And I've got an old school friend who said to me a little while ago, your legacy's assured, you've got all your books. And I was like, I've never thought of it like that. It's true, but I'm not doing it for legacy. To me, and if this is taking your point to a higher level, my purpose is to be here. I'm already here, so there's no purpose. If I'm fully conscious, the universe will take care of my purpose. It brought me here in the first place. So anything that's less than that will be ego. And ego will want to leave something behind, whether it's a palace or a business or a book or a child. So you've got to work through that and say, well, let me die and be nothing. There's a story about an enlightened guy who was making sand sculptures on the beach, but he was doing it down in the surf. And another enlightened guy went up to him and he said, I can see what you're doing here. You're making the most beautiful sculptures, knowing that they'll be washed away within hours. And he said, that's exactly right, because I'm being washed away all the time by the waves. So rather look at your urge to create a legacy, dissolve that, be present, and you'll create the biggest legacy, don't worry.
How does one, like Simon Sinek made this Find Your Why story very popular? I mean, how does an entrepreneur like Mav or Sunal and Kumo sitting here in the studio, like they're young and, you know, they're working for me today, but in 5 years, probably not. I would hope not. They would have moved on and done their own thing. But I mean, like when you're young, it's hard to know what that highest excitement is, to quote John Sarnet, or what that why is. True or false, guys? Like you don't know, right? So here's a group of people who are battling with resolving the question about why they do or should do what they do in their own context and life. So what advice do you have for entrepreneurs and the guys in the room?
Well, I'd say firstly, just start where you are. Trust who you are and where you are, and start with that. So if finding your why helps, then find your why. It's not the ultimate answer, but it's a start. What injustice infuriates you? Be mobilized by that energy. What did you want to be as a kid? In an innocent way, what did you want to be? A fireman. Why? Because I liked helping people. That's archetypal. If you help people, that's what teachers do. That's what healers do. Doesn't matter whether you living now or in 5,000 years ago, that applied. So if you dig into those deep things, doing what you love, using your talents, growing, self-actualizing, being of service to the world, making it a better place, then you're in alignment. You're more and more in alignment. But and that's the being yourself for a living journey that you set out on. So start with why. But then what happens when you're further down the track? You're going to ask, who am I? Because you don't actually know. So now that's, in order to be yourself for a living on the next level, you're going on that deep inner journey. I was just in London 2 weeks ago, and a friend of mine there he was first a fine artist, then he moved to London and became a chef. He was ill, and his healing from that, he's turned into a therapist, a massage therapist. But that hasn't formed yet. He's still in that creative phase, and the man's 51 years old. So he's in his third career, and he's now going into the unknown again, because he's asking the deeper question of who he is so that he can bring it to be of service. So I'd say go on the spiritual journey, start where you are, trust where you are, whatever works for you at the time, but never stop, keep going deeper. Because the more you find who you are, the more you manifest your ideal life around you, you know. And that is, to me, the most satisfying journey intrinsically. It's like being an artist. You paint for that moment. The fact that somebody buys your painting for $100 million 100 years after you've died is not really why you did it. Van Gogh he had paintings that are now worth $100 million each under his bed. He gave them to waitresses because what mattered to him was that being fully alive, being able to watch that sunrise and convey it through his being. Do that, your business will follow.
Yeah, I'd love that. The only thing that I've learned just in my own experience is to not give your mind questions that scare the hell out of you. Seriously, because it'll cause you sleepless nights, consternation, and then now you're stressing. For me, it's if you say to yourself, my brother asked me that once. Fuck, I'll never forget it. He said to me, who are you? And I said to him, I'm Matt Brown. He goes, no. Who are you? I'm like, well, I'm a human fucking being. He goes, no, but who are you? And he kept asking me over and over. And eventually I said to him, dude, well, who the fuck are you? Do you know what I'm saying? And he went, I'm a child of God. And I went, oh, please, that's so rich. Do you know what I mean? But I didn't like the question. I respected his answer. I didn't like the question because it made me feel uncomfortable. Right. I didn't see the relevance of it. And so what I also realized, and this was like 10 years ago, was that you will find those answers anyway.
Yeah, life will take
It'll take you there, dude. Like all you need to do is strap yourself in and enjoy the ride. Seriously, and take like every day as it comes, you know,
sure.
And not freak out about the fact that, I got to work out what my passion is in life, you know, or blah, blah, blah. It's just like, you will work that shit out. Like between the ages of 20 and 30, you shouldn't give a fuck. You shouldn't care.
Be 20 or 30, yeah.
Yeah, just like go and like have sex, do drugs, and be reckless with your life. You know what I mean? Don't take this advice to heart.
Yeah, listen to me rather.
But I mean, like, my point being is that when you're 30, okay, fine, now start serious. You got what, another 80 years left, but given the weight of medical advances. Do you know what I mean? Like,
but what happens if your dad dies when you're 24?
What do you mean?
Well, you can be just 24 being 24, and that has its place. But something deep and serious could happen like that throws you into a whole new realm where you actually have to face a lot of things. So I'm agreeing that life does take you that way, one way or the other. But I'm just saying be ready for it. Be aware of it. Be conscious. A child is innocent through ignorance, and a sage is innocent through having been through it all and being wise at the end of it. So we're all on that journey. And you can be... That's a sign from the universe that I'm saying something important.
Well, it could just be these automated sales calls that I've been getting. I wish they would all die.
Well, it's a bit of both. I think life is about the deep stuff and the nonsense stuff, you know, and you're navigating those two things. But yeah, definitely, I would say just be open to your true nature. So one thing that was bugging about your brother's question is that he wasn't actually asking you, he was telling you something.
Yeah.
So it was irritating because he was actually he wasn't listening. He was actually provoking you because he wanted to tell you that he'd found God. But the question itself is actually a fundamental question. Who are you? If you went to, I've forgotten the name of it, but that was one of the great spiritual teachers' final lessons was, who are you? If you can ask that question, you're actually going to answer everything. And if you find out who you are, because if you knew who you were, you know, not your name, not your title, not some analytical outcome, but if you were fully yourself, you would be answering that question in silence. You would be being yourself, and his ignorance would be shown by his question because you are yourself. So it is actually one of the ultimate questions, and it's just one to keep with you whatever age you're at.
Robin, let's wrap this up. Cool. I have one more searching question for you.
Okay.
Why do you do what you do? Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning?
I get up very slowly. I wake up naturally. I never use an alarm. I get up when I feel like it. I'm a late riser. When we chatted before, you said you're up early. So I'd say, just to embellish on that, find your own pace, do your own thing. Yeah, I feel like I've missed out on the morning hours, but I'm a late night person. And so what gets me up is, it's just, I have to be me, you know, it's like, and that's all I've really do. There's another one. I'm saying a lot of important things today. The universe is
But you have to be you, sorry.
Yeah, I just have to be me. That's all I want to do, Matt. I just want to be me. So doing admin, no, I've got more important things to do. I've got so much in me that just wants to come out. I just want to live. I just want to, and I joke, I say, if you put me on a desert island, but as long as I've got something to write with, if you gave me this on a desert island, I'd write in the sand because I need to write. So I've written the last, I don't know, probably 15 of my books on my phone. This new book of mine I wrote on my phone, on my touchscreen.
Whoa.
Exactly. I can't even believe it. But as long as I've got something to write, so there's so much in me that wants to come out that we could break that down and say, I want to do all these things, but that would just be tools. The real core thing is I just want to be me. I just want to live. So that's what gets me up. And then from there onwards, I start to translate that into structured things, sometimes responding to requests, sometimes having time to just write, just to be free. A lot of what I do is just letting what comes naturally lead me. Just be me. Just have time to myself. Let the stillness show the way. And then you end up with all these books.
Robin, so much power in that, dude. Awesome. Clap
Thanks
that
so
up.
much.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks. Lovely to work with you and meet you all. I'm impressed these young kids, eh?
Yeah, Kuma is really pumped.
We'll talk on after.
But dude, all the best for the book launch.
Thank you so much. Really good
I
chatting
expect
to
a
you.
signed copy.
Okay, we'll organize
and
it.
yeah, let's rock it. Oh, in fact, do you want to do Q&A? How many questions? Do we get quite a few? 3. You also have
4.
questions. Okay,
Cool.
here you go. Sorry, I keep doing that. You guys must just remind me about Q&A. Fuck.
Hi, so I've actually got a personal question.
Okay.
With like people our age, so 22 and above. So I've recently went to Sri Lanka, and that just opened up my entire brain.
Okay.
So since I did that, like I've been starting to meditate, and
Right.
my question is like, how do we as like, young people open up our consciousness? So from all the social conditioning that we've been like going through since we were kids, like it's always the internet, it's always this people telling us what to do and how to do it. How do we then fix that? Like how do we get out of that?
Right.
Well,
you've got some answers there already. I mean, there's travel is a big thing. Ancient spiritual traditions, expose yourself to those. Crisis, shit happens in your life, embrace it. Take drugs. I'm not advocating that, but a lot
You can
of...
smoke weed. It's legal now.
Well, that's why I'm stopping.
Why? Because
Because I'm a rebel. Yeah. No, I'm just making a joke about that. But that thing, I'm not saying that drugs are the answer and that they give you spiritual enlightenment. But many people who've become spiritually awakened will credit drugs as being in there somewhere. So if mind expand, ayahuasca, for example, which is a shamanic tradition, thousands of years old, has become very popular now. It's mentioned in my book. A friend of mine's been on quite a few retreats in the Amazon. So that's not a drug. That's a shamanic device. Do spiritual things like that if you call to it. Expand your consciousness in whichever ways you find. And just trust that you already know. As a child, you've got that. You've been conditioned into this person with a name and, an identity. That's not who you really are. So go and find who you are. And you really do know it. It's just a remembrance that's about peeling away what you aren't,
The Egyptians used to take a lot of shrooms. I'm serious, dude. It's proven. Like there's like historical evidence, like where there's your pictures and shit, like and whatever they used to write, the scribes and stuff. Like they used to take shrooms, like the shamanic drug sort of thing, because it gave them access to a higher consciousness. Don't advocate drugs, but it is something that people have worked with before for thousands of years. By the way,
drugs have dangers too, so you're always walking that knife's edge of mitigating against that. Are you gaining from it? But I'd say you're on that path, and just to embrace it, just to open and say, okay, well, I'm aware of this now. I've begun this journey, and just open yourself to the universe. Will give you what you need, and just be ready for it. Be open to it. Does that help?
yeah, it does help.
Okay.
It does. Thank you.
do you want to go grab a mic, dude? Come around this way.
I like these multicolored mics. It's just
they are cool, hey?
Very cool.
Yeah.
Little things like that make all the difference, eh?
This question is for both of you guys. Do you guys think the whole mental health thingy is like connected to in getting enlightened and spiritually enlightened? Or like how mental health is like on the rise now, like people are being more aware of it and stuff like that?
Mm-hmm.
I'd say definitely, because like Jung said, to be well adjusted to a society that's unhealthy is not a sign of health. So people are struggling. This whole thing of even this attention deficit type diagnosis, that just basically means that kids are intelligent and school is stupid. And you don't give them drugs so that they can sit there and be vegetables. That person needs their intelligence to come out. So I think mental health is very much linked to spiritual awakening, and that even in shamanic circles, that here, if somebody wants to be powerful, we vote for them, and if somebody's mentally ill, we put them in a hospital. It should be the other way around. If somebody wants to be powerful, you put them in a mental hospital and say, hey dude, you got issues here. this guy's having a psychotic episode. Actually, he's a healer and he's been called to heal. Let's hear what his insights are. So the world's upside down, and you need to navigate your way through that and turn that to your advantage, because you're the enlightened age. I'm the bridge. I'm turned 50 this year, and so I've got one leg in the old and one leg in the new. But you guys have to live it. You have to go, and there's no shortcut. You can read my books; they'll help. You'll think I'm great, but it's still about you.
This book's awesome.
Yeah, and I think when you're doing what you're meant to do, there's such an energy to it, you know. So just know that it's there, and just follow that, and the intelligence of it will come through. And yeah, definitely, mental health issues will just dissolve. You know, we all got a place in the world, and we've all got our unique contribution to make. So often that mental health issues are finding our way to it. What do you think?
Well, I think there's different sets of things, right? There's the spiritual set of things that you need to go through. There's the mental set of things that you need to go through. And there's the physical stuff. And you know, like, no one thing will make you happy. Like, you have to somehow get to a point where you work all three of those things to get to a place of enlightenment, however you decide to define that. Do you know what I mean? I just think it's to echo what Robin was saying. I think you really need to hold on to that curiosity, because I personally, like, I watch my 3-4-year-old son now run around, you know, playing and just watching him. He's far more closer to enlightenment than I am.
Exactly.
Because the older you get, the more you lose it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a funny thing. And so your job is almost is not to necessarily answer it definitively, but to continually revisit it.
Exactly.
So that you can hold on to the things that matter to you. Do you know what I mean?
With consciousness, because that's what I say. The kid is wise and pure and enlightened, but in an ignorant way. Now, you're going to be, as a father, half of you wants to preserve that innocence. In fact, you want to become like that yourself. He's the leader. He's the teacher.
Yeah, I'm jealous.
You're jealous. We're jealous, and his joy. He's such a happy thing, and look at all the shit you're dealing with. So you're jealous, and then the other half of it is you're trying to kind of mentor the guy into the world so that he knows how to, you know, cross the road and drive his car and run a business or whatever. So the human journey, that arc, is you come from innocence, and if you get it right, you finish in innocence. The difference is that you're innocent in a wise way, which is that you've been through all this shit, and you're still childlike and innocent. That's the work of the sage, is to be enlightened not through ignorance, but through having been through everything and having transcended it and realizing those things are not me. Those fears are not me. The name is not me, but there's something that is me here. And that thing, if I'm bringing that to bear in presence, then that's higher intelligence at work. I don't actually exist. I'm just in alignment. But it's great, because I am actually here in form. And that's the orgasm of life. Orgasm is tension. It's a build-up of tension, and it's a release. And we all are living tension. So there's a state of orgasm built into who we are. And if you get into alignment like that, most people's only taste of enlightenment is orgasm. For those few seconds, you become a child again. Your mind shuts down, and your whole being is pure. It's like watching a sunset. For that split moment, you're not thinking. You're not going, oh, this is the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen. I can't wait to tell my friend. Your mind goes quiet. And you and that sunset are one. That's orgasmic. So that's the state of being that you guys need to live in. That's the future of humanity.
Watch the sunset, stop taking photos.
Yeah, well, if you take photos, be aware that you just be present. Whatever it is that you're doing isn't as important as the consciousness with which you do it. So grow your consciousness.
Any other questions?
I just, I'd like to get a book of yours and get a signed copy.
Cool. Well, the new one's
there's
out in
4
7
here.
weeks, but I'll organize you some of the insights ones. It'll get you
Cool,
going in the
thank you.
meantime. Were there questions from anybody else there?
So we do have. So this is more about skills and passion
Okay.
within a business. So
Okay.
Jake says, how do you tell the difference between passions and skills? For example, you could be really good at something, but it doesn't mean you have a passion for it.
All right.
So how do you then work through it?
Well, that's one of the things I help people with always, whether it's coaching or the corporate stuff or talks, is to first look inwards. First, understand the change. We're going through quantum change. So whatever we're going through, stress, confusion, shit, that's quantum. Don't worry about it. That's the nature of the game. Second, okay, so now what do we use as our guide? The only guide you've got is yourself. So go inwards. Who are you? There's your question. What are you good at? So what talents have you got? That would be more the passion. What do you enjoy? So what are you good at? What do you enjoy? If you do those things, it must work. It's like that's the universe being intelligent. So if you're just aligning with that. Sometimes you've got skills, though. Maybe you were taught certain things. Before I started out on my own, I worked in banks and we analyzed jobs. People who were taught how to do these jobs, they didn't enjoy them. They weren't their natural talents, but they had them as a skill. So a skill is more superficial. It's out there on your periphery, whereas your passion's closer to you. And skills you can learn. And these days, I mean, you can pick things up in 20 minutes. I mean, even deep stuff, 20 minutes on Google and you're an expert. So skills are easy. They're not a competitive advantage if you want to use the old business model in business. Knowledge all knowledge is available. 30 years ago, knowledge was your lever. Now it's available. So what is insight? That's why my books are called Insights. It's your particular insight, which comes from being conscious. So if you'd say skills are on the periphery, your passion and your talents are closer to you, and then even closer is just your consciousness, your being. Your ultimate you is the part that is just space. All the space between the molecules in your atoms that are making you up. That's you, your space. Those atoms are coming and going all the time, living and dying, but you're still here. I say that consciousness will remain after death. I'll watch my death. I'll watch it happen. That's my sense. We'll have to see. But I'm just saying, be aware, be conscious, because it's the consciousness that prevails. And the consciousness is who we are, and it's the ultimate mystery. The more you look into who you are, the more you don't know. Yeah, the more you realize you don't and can't know. And that's the joy of it. You cannot answer it. You cannot tick it. Because it's a mystery. And that's why the more you search, the more there is to find.
We're going to leave it here.
Brilliant.
Because no one ever works out the meaning of life.
That's it.
So just live it.
Exactly. That is bottom line stuff. Brilliant.
Dude, awesome. Rad show.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Clap it up.
See you again. Cheers.